This podcast is the milk. Es la leche. You can't always translate expressions and idioms literally. We've collected a few Spanish idioms in this podcast that are different in English. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
With nearly 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you, Craig?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm very well myself, and I'm really looking forward to this podcast because I always find idioms fun, don't you?
Me too. We should perhaps explain to non-speakers of Spanish who listen to the podcast that in the introduction, es la leche would literally translate to it's the milk. But of course, we wouldn't say that in English as an idiom. So this week, we're talking about idioms that do not translate from English to Spanish or from Spanish to English. But before we look at some examples, let's listen to a voice message from Eva from Madrid, who loves her idioms.
Hi Reza, hi Craig. This is Eva from Madrid. First of all, I want to thank you for your podcast. It's helping me a lot to improve my English. I've been listening to it for 1 month. I was looking for an English podcast and then I found yours out, and it's definitely the best one. You make it very friendly and easy to understand, so thank you. I'm learning English to improve my professional skills, but that's not the main reason. I'm doing it basically as a hobby because I really enjoy learning languages. I like literature and films, and to me, it could be great if I could read books or watch movies in their original English. By the way, one thing I always love learning in any language, including Spanish, are their typical idioms, especially when you know where they come from. I think it's quite funny to realize the difference between what you are saying and what you are meaning. I've already learned some from you, as for example, meat and potatoes, and I wanted to ask you if you could please talk about some English idioms, maybe those ones you like the most, or maybe some idioms you think are very common. I don't know if you've already talked about this in your podcast. If so, please let me know the episode's number. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very, very much, Eva, for your message. It's always a pleasure for us to welcome new listeners. And speaking about idioms for us will be a piece of cake, I think. What do you think, Reza?
Yes, I think it will be like taking candy from a baby.
Before we look at some example idioms for Eva and for interested listeners, we have spoken about idioms in the past, haven't we?
We have. Eva, you asked us to give you the episode numbers. We did an episode specifically about family idioms. That was episode 245. So if you want to look at the show notes for that, for example, you could go to inglespodcast.com/245 and look at the notes and listen to episode 245 that way.
We also spoke about idioms connected to the house and the home. That was back in episode 220, so inglespodcast.com/220. And in the beginning, when we first started podcasting, we used to give 3 or 4 idioms each episode. So if you go back to the early episodes, 28, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, also 46, you'll find examples of idioms, and especially episode 148. So again, inglespodcast.com/148. All of these episodes are referred to in the show notes to this episode, which is 278, inglespodcast.com/278.
The difference between this episode and all those other episodes we've mentioned is that this episode is specifically about Spanish idioms that don't translate literally. In the other episodes we've mentioned, there's a mixture. Some of them do translate literally, some of them don't. Mixture. But here we're only looking at those which do not translate literally. So don't try and translate from Spanish into English, these ones, or you'll sound silly.
And before we begin explaining these idioms to you and giving examples, we'd like to tell you about another thing that is the milk, la leche, or what we'd probably say in English, maybe the bee's knees. The bee's knees is our sponsor, italki. Reza, why would italki be a good service for our listeners who are interested in improving their English?
Well, there are several aspects I could mention, but first let me sum it all up with one word: convenience. Italki is very convenient. First of all, there's no travel. You don't have to go anywhere. Well, if you're very lazy and going from your dining room to your bedroom
Like
is too
a
much,
sloth, perhaps?
like a sloth, un perezoso, well, I apologize, but come on, it's not going to kill you. You can do it from the comfort of your own home, anywhere where you've got an internet connection, anywhere where you can get onto something like Skype or Google Hangouts or something, Zoom or something like that. If you've got that, you can go and do italki. So you can take the lessons anywhere.
Sounds a bit expensive to have your own private personal tutor and language teacher. Is that true?
No, quite the opposite. Doing it on italki is cheaper, generally speaking, than having to actually travel to someone's house or a school. Well, actually, you could pay more or less money depending on what you're looking for, because you decide who's going to be your teacher. The teacher is not allocated to you, you choose. So you see the teacher's profiles, in which you find out what languages they can teach, up to what level, what experience they have, if they're a native speaker or they've learned that language themselves, etc., and how much money they cost. Another important thing is the scheduling of when you're going to do the class. Each teacher gives their availability of when they are free. So if you really want to have your class at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll find someone who can, because there's people all over the world. If all that hasn't convinced you, one more thing might motivate you. If you sign up for italki through our website and you pay for your first lesson, then italki will give you a $10 credit to help you carry on studying with your teacher.
Now, to take advantage of that special offer, go to the show notes for this episode, which is inglespodcast.com/278. Simply click on the italki picture in the show notes. And when you pay for your first lesson, they will give you a $10 free italki credit. And Reza and I would like to thank italki very much for sponsoring Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
So there you go. You can have a teacher even in your own room through italki. Es pan comido. Es chupao. As we said earlier, that's a piece of cake, or it's as easy as pie. You can also say when something is chupado or pan comido, very easy, like signing up to italki. It's a piece of cake. Now, you wouldn't translate that literally. If you say to someone in Spanish, eso es un trozo de pastel, people are going to say, ¿de qué estás hablando? Because it's an idiom which does not translate literally. You say pan comido, but we do not say eaten bread. We say a piece of cake. In Britain and in America, they tend to say as easy as pie, or another one. It's like taking candy from a baby. Candy is like sweets. Sweets, chocolates, that type of thing. Es como robar los caramelos de un bebé. Not very nice, but I guess pretty easy.
Yeah.
Or one last thing you could say is money for old rope. Dinero para ropa vieja. Yeah, exactly. Who's going to pay money for old rope? Not many people. If you can sell old rope to someone, well done. You're very lucky.
That's rope, R-O-P-E, yeah? Rope. Old rope. Let's look at some other idioms. Shall we say them in Spanish and see if the listeners know the English equivalent? For example, más vale lo malo conocido que lo bueno por conocer. Well, how does that translate into English?
Who knew this one? Better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
That's, for example, you have a really bad boss and nobody likes the boss. But hey, maybe the next boss will be worse than the one you have. So maybe it's better to keep the boss you have than take maybe a worse one in the future. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
Here's one, Craig. I wonder if you know this. This is a classic one which Spanish speakers wrongly attempt to translate. De perdidos al río.
From lost to the river. No, it's not, is it?
That's the mistake they make. No.
In English, we'd say in for a penny, in for a pound. So that's the British currency, pennies and pounds. In for a penny, in for a pound. Can you think of an example where we might use that?
Yes, imagine that I've had 5 beers and now I feel a little bit drunk. But you know what? It's Saturday night and I don't have to get up early tomorrow and I'm enjoying it.
So you're going to have number 6.
Yeah, everybody else is having another one. What the heck? Why not? In for a penny, in for a pound. 5 beers. Let's make it 6 beers.
Let's make it 10. In for a penny, in for a pound. 10 beers on Saturday night.
Eva, you said in your message that Eva said that she was quite interested to know the origins of some idioms. This one, in for a penny, in for a pound, comes from the world of betting or gambling.
Oh, does it? I didn't know.
Yeah, apostar dinero. Imagine you're betting on a horse race, for example, which is very common in Britain and the United States. Which horse is going to win? Well, if you're going to bet apostar for a horse to win a penny, if you're feeling lucky, well, let's make it a pound. Un penique? No, una libra. Why not? Let's go crazy.
Our next idiom is very similar, actually. It's not, it's quite similar in English as it is in Spanish. It's más vale pájaro en mano que ciento volando. What's that in English?
It's very similar in English, but it's not exactly the same. The numbers are different. We say, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush.
Bush is
Arbusto.
arbusto.
A little tree. So you talk about 100 birds and they're flying, volando, but we talk about only 2 and they're in the bush. But it's the same idea, isn't it? If you're hunting and you've already caught a bird, well, there may be 100 birds flying, but you haven't caught any yet. And it's the same in English. It's better to have caught that one bird and you've got it in your hand than to chase after those 2 which are hiding in the bush. Similar idea.
Exactly. Next one, es la gota que colma el vaso. Es la gota que colmo el vaso. How would you say that in English?
It's the straw that breaks the camel's back. As far as I know, Craig, this is an old one which comes from the Bible, doesn't it? There's a Bible story about more and more weight, peso, being added to a camel. And then just one more straw.
Una pajita.
Una pajita, dry grass was placed on the back and it was too much. Then the camel could not stand up anymore.
In fact, an example could be we have fairly noisy neighbors and sometimes the dogs are barking, sometimes they're quite annoying, they maybe leave rubbish and trash outside the flat. There's lots of noise and parties. In fact, maybe you can hear them now in the background of this podcast. And when they have parties late at night, that's the straw that breaks the camel's back. That really, really annoys me. And I go and speak to them. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's the last straw, you can also say. Absolutely the last straw. I can't take any more. No aguanto más.
Now, we came across this one in Spanish, which I must admit I hadn't heard before, but I like it. Estar como unas castañuelas.
Aren't they castanets in English that you use for sevillanas when you're dancing?
That's right. A very Spanish musical instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Estar como unas castañuelas. What do you think it means in English?
Well, if you're dancing and you're using castanets, you're probably happy. So perhaps I might say in English, I'm as happy as a clam. A clam is almeja.
Una almeja.
Yeah.
Yeah, strange, isn't it? You wouldn't have thought that clams are especially happy,
No, they get eaten a lot.
but that's what we say.
You could also be as happy as Larry.
Do you use that one yourself? That variation?
I don't think I use that idiom. It's common. I've heard it many times, but personally, I don't use that.
Would you use another similar one, perhaps over the moon?
Yep, I'm more likely to use over the moon. Yeah, over the moon. You're on holiday now. Are you as happy as a clam? Are you over the moon?
I'm over the moon to be finally off work. Yeah.
Congratulations. Our next idiom, en la variedad está el gusto. En la variedad está el gusto. What's that, Reza?
I think I could guess this one quite easily. Variety is the spice of life. Because variedad is variety. But the rest is a little bit different. Spice is especia. So variety is the spice of life. Let's say that life is like something you're cooking. And to make it interesting, you need to put in the spice. And the spice is the different things, the different aspects of life.
So maybe if you enjoy tasting different food, you could say, yeah, you should taste different dishes because variety is the spice of life. Or if you enjoy different kinds of music, you could say, I listen to all kinds of music because variety is the spice of life. It's nice to change and try different things.
Now, Craig, whenever someone is explaining something to you, something which maybe you're not going to like, would you prefer them to explain that sin pelos en la lengua or irse por las ramas?
Sin pelos en la lengua, I would say don't mince your words. To mince is to chop or to mix together. Mince, M-I-N-C-E. In fact, mince meat is carne picada. So don't mince your words means talk straight. Or I could also say don't beat around the bush or don't beat about the bush. Because that's really the opposite. If you beat around the bush or beat about the bush, you're not talking straight. You're not saying what you mean. So to be frank, to be honest, to be direct, is to not beat about the bush. Tell me what you think.
What do you prefer people to do, Craig?
I prefer people to talk straight. I prefer people not to mince their words, not to beat around the bush. What about you?
Me too. I like frank talking. Yep. Craig, what about this one? Do you know this? No hay mal que por bien no venga.
Yes, that's quite a common, popular one in Spanish and in English. We say every cloud has a silver lining. Be optimistic because with every negative situation, there's probably a positive side also. Every cloud has a silver lining. Can you think of a similar expression for that?
Yes, another version of that some people prefer is when one door closes, another opens. So the metaphor is a door closing, oh, well, that's a bad thing. But a door opening, that's a good thing.
Unless you have too many doors.
I guess. And you'll be there all day. So when one door closes, another opens.
For example, Reza's going to work this summer in Belfast and he's going to work very, very hard. So maybe that's not a positive thing. However, he's going to enjoy his mum's cooking. He's going to meet some very nice students. And he's going to escape the heat of Valencia in August. So I could say, Reza, every cloud has a silver lining. There are also good things about going to work abroad.
I will think about that, Craig, when I look at the clouds that there will be in Ireland every day.
They will have silver linings.
They will have silver linings behind them. I will look for them.
Pints of Guinness and bacon sandwiches could be the silver linings.
Craig, here's one that I hadn't heard before in Spanish. Let's see if you know it. ¿Quién fue a Sevilla? Perdió su silla.
Who went to Sevilla lost his chair.
But that's not really what we say.
No, that seems to me like you have to be very, very quick to do something or you miss out, you lose. So maybe you snooze, you lose. To snooze is to sleep a little, and to lose, perder. So you snooze, you lose. For example, there's one chocolate biscuit on the plate. Only one. And I take it. And I say to Reza, you snooze, you lose. If you're not quick, you don't eat the biscuit.
Unfortunately, though, I really wanted that biscuit. So, as a result, now estoy como una cabra.
You're as mad as a hatter. A hatter, a person who makes hats. You're as mad as a hatter, you're crazy. Loca, loco. Do you know anyone who's as mad as a hatter?
No comment. No comment. I do know some people. But we can all be temporarily as mad as a hatter. But I do know a few people who seem to be permanently as mad as a hatter.
I think that expression comes from them. Was it using the paint or glue from the hats that made them crazy when they made hats? I think it was the glue or maybe the lead if they used lead. I can't remember, but some chemical that hatters used to use sent them crazy, poisoned their system. So the expression as mad as a hatter was born.
Craig, if I said to you in English the idiom without rhyme or reason, what might that be in Spanish?
No tener ni pies ni cabeza. Without rhyme or reason. Rhyme is R-H-Y-M-E. So that would be like no explanation, without rhyme or reason. There's no explanation. I don't understand it. Could you think of an example, perhaps?
Yes, let's say that there is a lottery draw. A draw is when the winning number is picked. And they say, we're going to pick 4 numbers out of a hat. Not the Mad Hatter, eh? Just a normal person. He's going to pick 4 numbers, 4 balls with a number written out of the hat. And the third number that we pick out of the 4 will be the winner. But I would say to you, why the third? You're going to pick 4 numbers. It's not the first. You're going to pick another 3, but it's not the last. It's the third out of 4. That's a very strange way to pick the winning prize. There's no rhyme or reason for that. I can't see why they use that method.
There's no logic.
No logic to it.
The next one is no ver tres en un burro. No ver tres en un burro. What's that in English?
To be as blind as a bat. I'm sure most of you know that bats, murciélagos, they are blind or virtually blind, and they move about using radar, using sound.
Sonar, isn't it?
Sonar, beg your pardon, yeah. Sonar, beg your pardon. So, if you're as blind as a bat, your eyesight is very bad.
So without my glasses, I'm as blind as a bat.
Craig, if I give you cat instead of hair in Spanish, what on earth would I be talking about?
Dar gato por liebre.
Yeah.
Por gato por liebre.
But how do we really say that in English?
To take someone for a ride. Does that literally mean give someone a lift in the car? To take someone in the car?
No, because it's to give someone a ride. If you give someone a ride in American English or give someone a lift in British English, you are taking that person free in your car. But to take someone for a ride is dar gato por liebre, to fool them, to deceive them.
Next one, costar un ojo de la cara. Something's really, really expensive. Very expensive. How would you say that in English?
Well, it's funny that you use a body part in Spanish, costar un ojo. And I've also heard a variation, costar un riñón, is a variety of that in Spanish, a kidney. But we don't say either of those in English. We use different body parts. We say to cost an arm and a leg. An arm and a leg. Eh? You've got to give 2 parts in English.
Have you bought anything recently that cost an arm and a leg?
I certainly have. Since I've been doing up Reformar, my flat, I've spent many euros on things I prefer not to think about. But yes, I could name many household objects that have cost me an arm and a leg.
Now, to talk about people who are not very clever in Spanish, you'd say tener pocas luces. Tener pocas luces. Or le falta un tornillo is another Spanish expression. How could we say that in English?
Well, the first one is very similar in English. Tener pocas luces, to be dim. Dim is an adjective. Well, actually, it could be a verb as well, to dim. And it means to turn down the lights or to not have very much light. So it's similar to Spanish. If a light is dim, it's not a bright light. So the opposite of bright, a lot of light, is dim. So it's really very similar. Not an exact translation, but the idea is the same.
And you can use dim and bright to describe light and people's intelligence or how quick they are, because a dim room has little light and a bright room has a lot of light. A dim person is not very intelligent or quick with things, and a bright person is very intelligent and very quick. So dim and bright being opposites could be for light and also for personality.
And the other one you mentioned, I wouldn't say it's exactly the same, although it is similar. Le falta un tornillo means that you're crazy a bit. Mm-hmm. And in English, the way we say that is the same, actually. Missing a screw. So it's exactly the same in that translation. Missing is le falta, a screw, tornilla. So there is a literal translation of that one, missing a screw, le falta una tornilla. But Craig, there are other ways you can translate it which are not literal.
Yes, there are many in English. If you want to read these idioms, go to the show notes at inglespodcast.com/278. You can see them and follow along as we're speaking. But more expressions that describe people who are maybe not very intelligent, maybe a bit stupid. You could say as thick as two short planks. Plank, P-L-A-N-K, a plank of wood. That's short and thick. Because if you describe a person as being thick, that's very similar to dim, a bit slow, a bit stupid. As thick as two short planks. Or, not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Knives that are sharp, cut easily, and people who are sharp are also very intelligent, very quick. So it's comparing knives and intelligence, both possibly being sharp. Not the sharpest knife in the drawer, or not the sharpest tool in the shed, are both used to describe people who are not very intelligent. And the shed, S-H-E-D, is the small house in the garden in Britain where people sometimes keep their tools, herramientas. So not the sharpest tool in the shed. Can you think of any more similar expressions?
Yes, related to the idea being dim, tener pocas luces, you could say not the brightest star in the sky. So as we said earlier, bright means there is a lot of light. So if you're not the brightest star in the sky, you are dim. You could also say, in fact, there are many variations. One I've heard is an olive short of a pizza, or a sandwich short of a picnic, or a chip short of a basket. Have you ever heard that?
No.
Basically, you can say something short of a something.
Which means falta algo.
Falta algo, exactly. Le falta un tornillo. And I've heard people make them up. Have you ever heard
Yeah.
someone make their own up?
There are many. The lights are on, but there's nobody home.
No, but I mean, have you ever heard anybody make one up specifically with a something short of a something?
No, I've heard 2 or 3, but yeah, but there are many.
Oh, I've heard people make them up. And because it's kind of a standard expression, you'll get it. It's like, do you know John? Oh yeah, poor John. He's a
Card short of a deck.
a deck, something like you would understand. Oh, he's a bit dim, or he's a flower short of a bunch, or he's a. If you just made something up with short of, people would understand what you're saying. Like, oh, he's dim. There's something missing. He's not quite all there.
And the last idiom we have for you, you may know actually, it's a very common idiom, tomar el pelo a alguien. What's that in English? It's not to pull someone's hair, is it?
Nearly the same, but to pull someone's leg, a pierna. So similar, but a different body part.
Did I tell you that Coca-Cola is going to sponsor this podcast?
Oh yeah, you're pulling my leg.
I'm pulling your leg. Now it's your turn to practice your English. Why not send us a voice message and say hello? Tell us where you're from. Maybe try and use 1 or 2 of these idioms in your message just to practice them. We'd also be very interested to hear your ideas about future podcasts. What would you like us to speak about? What grammar are you having problems with? What vocabulary area would you like us to speak about? And would you like us to do more podcasts on idioms, for example? If you would like to send us a voice message, go to speakpipe.com. That's speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. Remember, you only have 90 seconds to leave your voice message on SpeakPipe. If you need more time, just record an MP3 and attach it to an email. Reza, where do they send their emails?
You could email us either Craig, that's craig@inglespodcast.com, or me, belfastreza@gmail.com.
If you would like to study English with a downloadable audio course, at Mention Ingles we have some audio courses for sale. Go to store.mentioningles.net. And we'd also like to thank all our wonderful patrons before we go out the door. If you would like to join our Patreon program, it's just a minimum of $1 per month. And with that, you get instant access to recent transcriptions that have been transcribed by our friend Angelica. And if you would like to join our co-producers over at Patreon, who help us with the show notes, go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Ingles podcast. And thank you to all of you who are supporting us on Patreon. What's next week, Reza?
On next week's episode, we're going to talk about translating and interpreting.
So we'll see you next week. Thank you very much for listening this week. Until then, it's goodbye from Reza.
And bye-bye from Craig.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.
This podcast is the milk.
Do you want to say es la leche or no hace falta?
I'll say it in Spanish afterwards.
Okay.
Otherwise, it sounds crazy.